Just quickly introducing your host for today. So Ali is a super special friend as well for Epiphany, for me personally. I don't know, he keeps listening to all these crazy ideas that we keep coming up with, and also being a good sport and participating in them. And Ali used to be used to work for Jazz as the head of CSR. That's when I met him. And now he's moved on to Mobilink Microfinance Bank, which is one of the largest microfinance banks in Pakistan. So over to you, Ali. Chris, you're in safe hands. And the topic today that we're going to be, listening to is, two sides of the coin, from an entrepreneur to an investor. So over to you, Ali.
Thank you, Summer. Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning, good evening, because I'm looking at the participants list. They have tuned in great numbers from different parts of the world. So wherever you are, I wish you well. Yes, the topic today is very interesting, and I think it couldn't have been a better date, Summer, because I do not know if Chris follows cricket, because today is a very special day for us. Pakistan is going for a semi-final match with Australia later tonight. And the coin will be a very interesting thing, because most of the games that we are witnessing, the side winning the toss elects to field first. So yes, looking forward to the game, and I think the coin will be really something which we'll be talking about till the next few hours. Okay, thank you very much, Sabar. I think what I was doing since yesterday. I was tuning in bits and pieces just to catch some glimpse of this wonderful initiative that you have been talking about for quite some time, and now I think it's the reality, where you're talking about how gaming can actually change the overall landscape, and we can put together the best of minds to see how we can use games for other, not just to let's say energize ourselves, but also to other means. And I think education, other thematic verticals are some prime examples where gaming industry has been making some serious inroads in the positive manner. So wonderful, kudos to you, Asad, and entire FFNE team. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't take much of your time, because I'm sure you must be waiting to hear from our very special guest, Chris Cheney, who is an award-winning serial entrepreneur listed under the Forbes 30 Under 30 recently, and a startup mentor with a 15-year immaculate track record of leadership and success in the global sports arena, esports, and gaming industries. He is an active investor and startup advisor with more than 40 portfolio companies, which have spanned across 10 different countries and globally. And he's doing a wonderful job in the gaming, consumer media, and blockchain industry. Welcome, Chris. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and I wish Forbes 30 Under 30 was more recent, but it's been a few years. I'm a little bit older now, but not too old. So recent still works, I guess.
Okay, Chal. Wonderful. I think, Chris, before we get into some of the details, I think there's no denying that every one of us has started with games in one form or the other, starting with, let's say, at a very young age, where we used to play in the sand, building sand castles. And then I still remember that when I got my first gaming console, which was an Atari back in the 80s, I used to feel that king of the world. And then we upgraded to the Sega, the Nintendos, and the PlayStation, and then the PC platforms. So just to set the stage, how has your experience, what motivated you to get into this gaming industry? What was that inspirational point or that motivating point that you said, okay, no, this is something which I would like to pursue as a profession?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me. Excited to be part of this conference. Really, this initiative, which I think is having and going to have a really positive impact on the games industry in Pakistan and the region. So I think that's really terrific what the team is doing, and thank you for having me. For me, I've spent prior to getting into gaming and esports, I spent about a decade in more traditional sports. But within that, I was really focused on unique, fast-growing sports that had deeply passionate communities that were growing, and a lot of times growing very, very quickly outside of the mainstream. So in the US, that's sports like mixed martial arts, action sports, obstacle course racing, fitness, and spent a lot of time in those areas. And a few years ago, I discovered gaming, and I saw a lot of similarities. I saw this fast-growing community that was deeply passionate, that had its, its own sense of, sense of being, its own identity, and many identities, of course, within that. And I thought this is really fascinating because I've played some video games growing up, like you said. I still have my Sega actually at my parents' house. Hasn't been used in a while, but and I thought this is incredible. I didn't know that a community of this size, that's this global and growing this much, even existed. And so I decided to just take a complete dive into this industry, and I met so many amazing people and an incredible reception to me just wanting to learn. It was just about learning. How do I learn about the people? How do I learn about this industry? And everyone was really positive and welcoming. And so I decided this is the industry that I need to be in, because it combines my passions for unique communities that are that have a sense of identity, that are growing fast, and that are overlooked in some ways by the mainstream. Of course, today now gaming is mainstream, and we talk about it, and everywhere you look, people talk about gaming. But 5 or so years ago, that wasn't the case yet. So that was really my entry point, indirectly through sports, and then really just discovering this community and falling in love with the people and the industry, and deciding this is where I need to spend my time. And I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of great people, to work on some great projects, to have had a lot of global experience at this point, because the industry is truly global. So I consider myself quite lucky there.
Okay, wonderful. So I think, Chris, during that brief introduction, which was quite elaborate in itself, I think I picked up very one interesting word which you said, passion, because that was the main driving force that motivated you to go into this into further depths. And I think, given my engagement with the startup and the digital ecosystem in Pakistan, I think I'd just like to share some statistics that the digital ecosystem has been evolving quite exponentially over the last few years in the country. Just this year, I was reading about the statistics that by end of Q2 2021, nearly $85 million dollars have been raised by different startups, which just shows the overall potential of this industry, where different startups and incubation and acceleration facilities are doing some fantastic job. So when and since you started off your journey as an entrepreneur, as a mentor as well, so can you just guide us for the young people who are actually aspiring an entrepreneurial journey going forward, that okay, how did you start up that, and how are you now positioning yourself as an investor, and what are some of the key lessons that you learned which you can actually guide to the young youth, so that they, once they set off, of course they will have their own set of challenges, but something which you can give as a kind of an advisory, that okay, these were some of the pitfalls that they can look about, some of the opportunities that they can actually keep a check upon. So can you just talk about that particular side of the experience that you have envisaged?
Absolutely. So I think one of the key aspects when wanting to build in gaming, esports, or even other industries like blockchain and cryptocurrency, I think you have to be a sponge. You have to be a learner, and approach it from the perspective that you're open to new ideas. You're open to meeting as many people as possible, to listening to their perspectives, and to gather all of that and then try to make sense of it. But first and foremost, to be a sponge, to be a learner. a student, and I'm still a student of gaming, a student of esports, and you learn truly every day. So I think that's and because a lot of people, they come into the industry and they've played video games their whole lives, and maybe they feel that gives them, the all the prerequisite information that they need, and that's great to have from a background perspective, but you're still learning. Everyone is, and you have to be absolutely open to that. So being a sponge and being truly a lifelong learner within this industry and beyond, I think is fundamentally really important. Then at the same time, um, the industry is moving very fast. There are a lot of things going on. A lot of people are building different projects, different companies, and you have to focus. You have to find what is meaningful to you, what you're excited about, perhaps passionate about, and then pursue that. Pursue that with extreme focus, because there are a lot of distractions around you because of things moving so fast, and there's always news and always chatter. So I think you have to stay very, very focused on what you're building, and you're always, again, you're always learning and certainly soaking in new information, but staying incredibly focused is just as important as learning and being a sponge, and then at the same time continuing to build relationships with people in the space. Build your tribe, build the community of people that get inspired by, that are also building, that are also passionate about the space as you are, and and consult them, get feedback from them, support each other, and grow together, succeed together, fail together, and build those meaningful relationships. So on the one side, it's learning, which we should all do all the time. Then two, it's being focused on what you commit to. Commit and focus. Sometimes I see younger people come in and they work on one project, and then they work on the next, and then the next, and then the next, and commit and focus. Find something, commit to it, focus on it. And then three, find and build a tribe, a community that you want to belong to, that supports each other, and that grows and succeeds together. And those are the people that will be really meaningful on your journey, even if you ever venture outside of the industry. So those are three, both learnings and perhaps some pieces of advice that could be helpful.
No, this is excellent. I think, Chris, you've really summed it really well. Because whether this particular industry or any other industry, I think the formula is the same: that perseverance, consistency, hard work, appetite to continuously learn. So I think these are all elements of success. So Chris, since you now are looking after the affairs of C4 Plus, which is your new initiative, which is a holding company for all your investments, and you've graduated, or I don't know if I'm using the correct term, but like starting from an investor to a mentor and now investor. How do you define this journey? Like, what are the two complementary ends, and how is it like? Is it difficult? Is it easy? How would you like to put together in a kind of a small elaborate answer that people can actually understand?
Well, the one thing I'll say is that it's a winding road. Um, sometimes we set out, and I thought when I graduated from university, I thought I had this very clear path that I was following, my own path, but a very clear one. And then, as you get on the path, you realize that it's not clear and it's not straight. You have these patches of darkness, and you don't know where you're going, and you're just trying to figure out. And then you also realize that it's winding left and right and up and down, and you have to embrace that. So that's from entrepreneur to investor to entrepreneur, mentor, advisor, investor. That is a winding journey. And I think what I mentioned earlier about being open-minded and learning, that's been one of the things that has led me to this point. And because I didn't set out to be an investor at all, it happened. And I guess I allowed it to happen. And then I embraced the opportunities as they came my way. In the last 3 years, almost 3 years, we've made about 35 investments, almost 35 investments, actually now more than 35 investments as of last week. And so we've been fairly busy with a new investment every single month. And a lot of these opportunities have just come very organically. And we're learning about about all the different investment structures and round sizes and how to get your position in a deal and how to add value, all the things that even as an entrepreneur, I wasn't as conscious about, because you're focused on just building your startup and then, yeah, sure, fundraising. But now, as you're going from one deal to the next, I'm learning what it's like to be in these other shoes. And I think it's given me an appreciation yet again for being an entrepreneur, and how you're dealing with investors on that side. So I'd say winding road, and something that's happened very organically for me, based on an open-mindedness to seize opportunities, and continue to expand my network. C4 Plus happened organically. It was not planned. It happened. I allowed it to happen, and that's how I've been working across most of my journey. I've allowed things to happen, and I've embraced opportunities as they've come to me.
Okay. So Chris, I think, no, thank you very much. I think that is a very important evaluation, as you described, that yes, you come across different paths and then you need to take a decision, and then you just go on that road and see how it's faring out. Uh, when we talk about this particular ecosystem, generally there remains a gender gap, because you have been on both sides of the coin, both when you started your first business and now that you're now investing in different startups. Uh, Normally what is seen is that there remains a gender gap in the level of funding which is raised by startups. Do you think that this is true?
I think so. I think so. And I look at it from two perspectives. One, I think there are fewer female founders today in gaming. That's a starting point. There are already fewer. Sometimes I think they're just not encouraged enough. There should be, and there can be more. But we also need to encourage more women, more girls to be founders in this space. So I think that's on us as an industry. So that's one. And then two, I think as investors, sometimes we have an inherent bias, and I guess that's a bias for everyone, that I think it's easier for us to fund investors that we can relate to perhaps a bit more. And I think a lot of times for men, it's easy to fund other male founders. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's the way it should be. And I work hard to not look at things that way, and to be very conscious, right? To be very conscious and really intentional and think about it. But I think a lot of times, in the same way I mentioned the tribe earlier and the community, most likely our tribe and our community will be similar to us. And because most of the investors are male, then it becomes quote unquote easy to then also support and fund male founders. But you have to be more intentional. You have to be more thoughtful to say, how can I support this next crop of female and diverse, entrepreneurs. So I think one, we already have less female founders to begin with, and then I think investors sometimes fall into this trap of supporting founders that are more perhaps like them, and so yeah, that creates challenges that we need to work on.
So speaking about challenges, Chris, so now you talked about two important points. So the audience would be interested that, okay, if we would like to encourage more females to enter the gaming industry. So what can be those top maybe 3 points, or like kind of those entry points which can facilitate more female entrepreneurs to get into the gaming industry, because we are talking about gaming as a platform which can open more avenues. And also, how can we make this entire industry more inclusive, given the challenges, given the overall natural tendency, that inclination that, okay, because the investors are mostly, or I think predominantly male, so they would like to fund male startups.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think on the investor side, what we have to do is we have to hire more female investors. So if you run an investment firm, you know, I think the new hires that you make, you should very strongly consider bringing in women onto your team. Because then from their perspective, I think they will naturally, hopefully support also, you know, female founders and female females in the ecosystem, women as an ecosystem in the ecosystem as a whole. So I think the investors can do that. They can also, encourage the companies they've already invested in to hire more women, to become more diverse, because we know how it oftentimes happens is you work for a gaming company, you're very successful, and then you decide to start your own gaming company. So we need to give women those opportunities at companies that we've already invested in. So I think that's the second part that, you know, investors can do, very actively encourage their portfolio companies to hire women, and hire themselves on their own teams, and on the investment side, hire women as well. And then, you know, as an industry, I think it is valuable, and what we should encourage is more programs that specifically, you know, support women that want to get into gaming, and also remove some of those barriers of entry around related things like coding, you know, software development, which I think has traditionally been male dominated and is related to the gaming side. But I think, you know, there's programs, you know, one that just comes to mind is Girls Who Code. I think they're on the US side, and there's some other programs. We need to support more programs like that, that offer an entry point to girls, to women, to get into the space. And then I think, again, be just very, very intentional, very thoughtful about it, and encourage, you know, women, girls to get into the industry. I think that's, you know, that's important. We need more programs, we need more support, and people to really actively think about it. And then I think there's change. And one final maybe note on that, a lot of people don't realize that when it comes to mobile gaming, it's basically 50% women already. And mobile is the future of gaming. There's no question in my mind that mobile is the future of gaming, and that already is 50% women. So, you know, let's work on getting more women into the industry side of things as well, and be very intentional about it.
And absolutely, Chris, no denying, because mobile phone is the remote for your future on every front. I think recently I was reading a statistic which is for our country, that more than 90% of the people that access internet in Pakistan is through their mobile phones. So, which was very, I think, something very meaningful in terms of where the overall industry is heading towards, and where we need to amplify our efforts. So when we specifically talk about the gaming industry, Chris, so as an active investor and startup advisor, what are some of the basic or the top 3 skills that you seek in a gaming startup? And what they, maybe feel free to segregate them in terms of the technical skills as well as the personal and soft skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think obviously it partly depends on what actually you're building or wanting to build within the space. You know, some products or some companies require a lot deeper technical expertise than others. I've invested in agencies, marketing agencies. That's obviously not a necessarily technical skill set that's required. But also in, you know, in startups that are building platforms, where there is a significant technical component. So I generally say you want to be approachable as an entrepreneur. You want to be open to feedback and be very approachable. Sometimes entrepreneurs can fall into the trap that they're so focused on what they're building that they're not willing and able to listen to, feedback from the outside, including from investors. And being focused is fine, but you need to be receptive and open to feedback. That's very, very important. And I think investors value that tremendously. You have to have a lot of conviction in what you're building, because you're going to get told no a lot, whether from investors, potential clients, maybe even people you want to hire and add to your team. You will get told no a lot. And so you have to have conviction. You have to have an unwavering conviction and commitment to you, to your team, and to what you're building. That again is not exclusive, mutually exclusive to listening to feedback. Listening to feedback and having conviction is, two different things. So being open to listening to feedback and taking that in, while at the same time having tremendous conviction and being able to show that in what you're building. And then I think, to me, one of the skills or one of the aspects that I've really liked when working with entrepreneurs is that they build a really strong team, not just in terms of CVs and backgrounds, but I think a team that has a great internal energy, that is like a small community in itself, where people are excited about working together. They're fired up. You can sense that there's a great leader or leaders, that's spurring on this team, and together they can win. Because fundamentally, if you're in the right market, if the right opportunity exists, then it's up to the team to successfully execute. And a leader, a founder, is able to rally that team, to get them excited, to create that kind of energy that ultimately, to me, will make a team successful. So you work on that. That's maybe not a skill you have overnight, or that's something you need to refine. But I think creating that kind of team cohesion, that kind of sense of community and wanting to succeed together, I think that's another skill that that founders can portray to investors, and that can help them succeed in building their startup.
Excellent. So I think we're almost there towards the end. I'm sure there are a lot of other things that we'd like to talk about, but given the time constraints, uh, Chris, you must have interacted with Pakistani founders and startups during your journey. How do you see that Pakistani startups are fitting into the overall global gaming industry, and what is something which inspires you about them, and how would you like to give them that kind of advice if they were to take this even further, like 2 notches high? What would be some of the critical advice that you would like to give them?
I think it's an exciting market, and a growing ecosystem, and obviously evidenced by this conference that we're all a part of, and we need more like it. And I'm excited again to play a very small role. I'd encourage more founders, more Pakistani founders, to really reach out, within Pakistan and beyond. Build relationships, get in front of investors, get in front of advisors, get in front of potential partners. Just be very proactive in reaching out, because the more often investors, advisors, partners get interactions with Pakistani founders, I think the more it puts it on their map. If you start getting, as an investor, a lot of emails from Pakistani founders, you will take notice, and that's one thing to do it. That's how we're going to, create awareness and I think interest ultimately. So I'd encourage founders to be really proactive in reaching out and telling the story of a growing ecosystem, telling the story of the opportunity. The more you do that, I think the more the ecosystem will get support from the outside, which is really needed. And then within its, education and, getting more programs to support entrepreneurship. But the ones that are out there, the Pakistani founders that are out there, I would encourage them to really to reach out, to be proactive, to build relationships beyond Pakistan, so we can get all that energy, all that the capital, the support to flow in from the outside while building a strong ecosystem from the inside.
Excellent. I think, Chris, that was really inspiring.